Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Hanna Shelest. The Trump administration has once again raised quite a few eyebrows with controversial comments on the Russian aggression against Ukraine. One of Trump's top negotiators, Steve Witkoff, once again suggested Ukraine should give up land for peace, while Trump himself seemed to blame both Putin, Zelensky and his predecessor Joe Biden for the war in equal measures. Meanwhile, Ukraine struck a Russian military facility responsible for the deadly attack on the city of Sumy, with dozens of innocent civilians lost their lives. So will Trump's emerging deal with Moscow mean sacrificing Ukraine and the ideals of the free world? Joining us now is Hanna Shelest, Director of the Security Programs at Ukrainian Prism. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning.
So these reports from concerning what was said in the wake of the meeting between Witkoff and Putin, that a deal could be close, it is on the horizon, but also suggestions that all the occupied regions of Ukraine would be pretty much given over to Russia in exchange for peace. This was not said officially, but this is what Witkoff has himself suggested. What do you make of all this?
You know, it's always easy just to forget about the problem rather than solve it. That's like when you have a small wound, for example, on your hand, what you're going to do, to put some medicine on it or just to cut. What Mr. Witkoff is proposing, de facto, is cutting, not caring that the person that you cut the hand would just bleed to the death. And because that's much easier, definitely, to trade somebody else's territories when it doesn't belong to you, when it's not your people, when you've never been and don't care about people on the ground, because it is not your land, not your country. Your goal is to satisfy the president, and president would like to forget about the problem. So in this way, the problem is not in general the position of the United States, because here we heard very different position, a lot of the support from both Democrats and Republicans for Ukraine, from ordinary Americans, a lot of the support. But that is just the desire for the simple decision, quick decision to forget the problem.
And now some say that the Americans are forgetting that this is not a real estate deal. If these territories are kept by Russia, this is going to mean ethnic cleansing.
It's already meant, because if you follow the news of the last year, you are from the occupied territories, and a lot of the official Russian decrees issued for these territories, de facto, it is more and more of the pressing, even genocidal, sometimes decrees. For example, you cannot get any basic support, including medical or to register your kid, if you don't have Russian passport. If you wear something blue and yellow, you can be arrested. In more and more towns, we hear about the soldiers coming to the houses and taking off Ukrainian books. Just recently, this week, I read the news from one of the towns in the Donetsk region, where military started to come and to check phones of the students at the educational facilities, if they have any Ukrainian songs, for example. If you have, you're not passing the exam. You know, from these small patches, I'm not speaking about the tortures, about the disappearing of people, about the real struggle on the ground with arrests and everything. But just these small elements are clearly demonstrating that for Russia, first of all, it is extremely important to eliminate anything Ukrainian. What is these territories?
So why do you think the Trump administration is doing that? Because they indicate, oh, we might be losing patience with Putin. Putin is attacking Ukrainian cities. We see what he's doing. And then all of a sudden they are backtracking. They're saying, oh, it might have been a mistake. Also, there are so many great economic opportunities with Moscow that could bring peace to the continent. Why do you think they are actually going down that path? Is it simply because some of Trump's advisors would rather see a rapprochement with Moscow than justice and retribution and allowing Ukraine to fight back?
First of all, it's definitely, you were very right in the beginning when you said that, unfortunately, some of his advisors are considering this not as the war, not as something existential, something from the values-based domain, but just the commercial situation where you always can negotiate and your enemy immediately can become your friend, just if it is beneficial for both sides. So considering the sizes of the Russian economy pre-war, because they also, unfortunately, are not doing the proper evaluation of the current stage of the Russian economy. They're thinking that it is the country of a lot of economic opportunities. So if Russia is bigger, Russia is considered more influential, plus they still live with some images from the Soviet past about the glory of the of Moscow. So why to care about Ukraine? Can Ukraine give the same in terms of money? And it seems to me that first of all, it is coming because of the misevaluation of the current situation, that the fact that they are thinking about both countries something like 20 years back, not in 2025.
And also, if it only was about transactions, but Ukraine, specifically President Zelensky, recently said, okay, if you want a transaction, we're going to give you one. 15 billion for American anti-aircraft missiles, air defense, so purely in order to protect civilians. And what does Trump say? He says, oh, Zelensky always wants to buy missiles, and actually accuses him of being partially responsible for the war. This goes beyond transactionalism. This, some people say, is an indication that America is taking sides, and it is taking the wrong side in this conflict. What would you say about such statements?
I would not go as far as saying about America taking the sides, but at the same time, we clearly should remember that Mr. Trump himself never been a specialist in the military, for example, or the speaks about social, economic issues. That's something much closer to him. So I have very big doubts that he can differentiate between the Patriots as the defensive, very important weapons against the ballistic missiles, and any type of the big missile, just considering them the same big weapons. So if it is the big weapon, it can target another territory.
That's a good point, that actually, because if I may, this question was posed during a press conference, and perhaps Trump didn't actually have a brief on that. Well, obviously, we may speculate, right?
Yes, definitely. It's more of the speculation, but just building on the previous statements, understanding the logic behind many of his statements. So for him, buying of any type of the weapons, when he don't understand that it is the defensive weapons, it is the prolongation of the war. So when you go with this logic, he wants to quickly negotiated peace. He wants quick ceasefire. It's not happening. And suddenly somebody is asking to buy more weapons. Definitely, you are the bad guy, because you're asking more weapons. It means you're asking not peace, but the war. And here is the huge problem is, who are those advisors who are around him? So my main questions would be not to the President Trump, understanding that he cannot just have everything in his head, but to the advisors around him. What they're advising and why they're advising.
Now, there was something even more disturbing emerging from the initial reports concerning Witkoff's Moscow visit. He said that the question of NATO and Article 5 was somehow being discussed with Putin. Why is it even on the table? Russia was actually making this excuse about NATO expansion at the beginning of the war. This was debunked many times. And yet, all of a sudden, this is coming from an American official, as if it was a legitimate concern that America has to respect. Do you think there is a risk the US might actually trade the security of Europe in exchange for improving relations with Moscow?
Let's remind to our viewers one important thing. Since 1949, when NATO was created, Article 5 was used only once, and it's happened on the request of the United States of America in 2001 after the 11th of September. So who in the whole history of NATO was the main beneficiary of the Article 5? It was the United States of America. For many states of Eastern Europe, definitely after 2014, Article 5 became a very important deterrence element. They understood that they can trust Washington and to be under the protection, but not only Washington, but definitely all other NATO members. And we hear how other 31 are very much adhere to the principles of the Article 5 and all others within the Washington Treaty. So now making such a statement, it's really surprising. And I would just repeat your question, why Mr. Witkoff is allowing himself just to repeat Moscow narratives without proposing any counter narratives.
So can Europe step into this situation? We had Chancellor in waiting, Mr. Friedrich Merz, saying that he's open to delivering the Taurus missiles to Ukraine. We have other countries providing more and more security packages. Do you think that European societies will be able to understand in the long term also that this is also an investment in security? In Ukraine, Europe would have a powerful partner with great battle-proven military and expanding defense industry and becoming basically the bulwark against Russia.
First of all, that really depends on their governments, because Ukrainians explained as much as possible during this year, and we've explained by the real situation on the ground. But we cannot persuade the whole population of the countries if their politicians are not doing it. So here is the cards in the hands of the leaders of many European countries where the doubts are raising. The second, Russia is helping to explain this a lot when they're doing provocations at the borders of the United Kingdom, of Ireland, of Portugal and Spain, or when you go to the Polish-Lithuanian borders. So all these provocations in the waters or on the land is the best way probably to prove that Russia is not going to stop just with Ukraine. Maybe not the full-fledged war, but any types of provocations, they are already holding them against the different countries. Plus, you see that Russia is planning the extension of their military presence in other regions around the globe. So it would be not only about these countries, but also about their partners or where the interest of these countries. Like yesterday, Australia, for example, made the note because Russia decided to make the military base at one of the islands in Indonesia, not far from Australian borders. So we understand that it has a spillover effect. So it's not now only around the Ukrainian borders that you can forget if you're 1,000 kilometers. And don't forget that the distance from the western border to Ukraine to Paris is the same as to Donetsk. So Europe is really small in terms of the military theater in case any real disruptions would continue and Russia is not stopped.
So it's a threat that's reaching global proportions now. Unfortunately, we have to park our conversation there. Hanna Shelest was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insights. And I'm Hanna Shelest. You're watching TVP World. Please do stay with us.